Syria's new leader will be among the world leaders gathering in New York for the UN General Assembly next week. Meanwhile, the country's foreign minister is heading to Washington today. It's the first such visit in more than 25 years. After an Islamist-led rebel alliance ousted Bashar al-Assad back in December, the U.S. has already lifted most sanctions it imposed on Syria. Now the Syrian government says it expects to finalize a security and military agreement with Israel by the end of the year. Just a reminder that Syria and Israel are technically at war, and a deal between them would be a dramatic breakthrough. Joining us from our international affairs desk is Kethevane Gorjestani. Hello to you, Kethevane. The first such visit in 25 years. Needless to say, this is quite significant, isn't it?
It's very significant because it is a symbol, those 25 years. And it's also the latest step in Syria sort of returning to the normal international community stage, if you will. Since overthrowing Bashar al-Assad, the new interim president has traveled. He has traveled to Europe. He's met with a lot of leaders, including with Donald Trump. You remember that historic handshake that took place in Saudi Arabia in May. And so this is that last step. And of course, it will culminate with that speech in front of the UN General Assembly. Since that handshake with Donald Trump, there has been a lifting of sanctions from the United States. A lot of them have been lifted, but not all of them have been lifted. And so that is going to be one of the main goals of the foreign minister during his trip to Washington. He is set to go to Congress and meet with people there, with lawmakers, to try to get those still remaining sanctions to be lifted. But that's not the only goal. He's also there to update the Americans on how the negotiations with Israel are going, because those two things are sort of combined when it comes to how the Americans view it.
And we're also wondering about how we're going to break down those two issues, starting with sanctions.
Well, the sanctions, of course, this is something that the Syrians have been longing for a long time. And the first sanctions were lifted by Donald Trump with an executive order back in late June. Most of those sanctions were related to sort of ending the isolation of Syria from the international financial system. The goal there was to allow Syria to start rebuilding its economy and start rebuilding concretely the country. And so that was the focus there. There was also another move by the United States during that time, which is lifting the terrorism designation for Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which HTS, which was the rebel group that was led by al-Shara in the past and that had ties to al-Qaeda. But there are still sanctions in place. One is that Syria officially still is designated by the United States as a state sponsor of terror. And so that could be something that they get from the Americans. The other thing is the Caesar Act, which was voted on by Congress in 2020. That was the general framework for all of the recent sanctions on Syria. And so, yes, the Trump administration has put exemptions on it over the past few months. But in order to make those lifting of sanctions permanent, you have to go through Congress. And that is why the foreign minister is meeting with senators on Capitol Hill to push for that Caesar Act to be voted on so that it can be revoked. But Senator Lindsey Graham, a Republican who is involved in that Caesar Act, has made it very clear that he has a couple of conditions in order to do that. One is for Syria to join the coalition against ISIS. The second one is to move towards a new security agreement with the Israelis.
Yeah, and when we talk about an agreement between Israel and Syria, Damascus says they're close. Do we have any idea if they really are?
Well, look, they are very confident, the Syrians. The interim president al-Shara on Wednesday told reporters that the negotiations could yield results, quote, in coming days. But he did insist also that Israel, in this case, needs to respect Syria's territorial and integrity. A security deal for the Syrians would involve two main things. One, they want Israel to stop bombing Syria, because we've seen over the past few months that the Israelis have carried out dozens of strikes, including one in central Damascus. The second thing is that they want the Israelis to move out of what was supposed to be a UN-controlled buffer zone. So what the Syrians are calling for is a return to sort of the agreement that was agreed on in 1974, where there is that buffer zone controlled by international forces. They are, however, not completely trusting in the Israelis, and that's where the Americans come into play. They're pushing the Americans to sort of get the Israelis on board. What is important here, the goal here is to get a sort of stabilization with the Israelis. Al-Shara made it that very clear. First, a security agreement, maybe some other agreements in the coming months. But for now, at least, he has put aside completely the idea of normalizing relations with Israel.
All right, Kethevane, thank you very much. Kethevane Gorjestani, France 24's International Affairs Editor.